Jack Reed, a retired Army colonel, stood silently at gate C-12 in Phoenix Skyport, watching the plane he was supposed to be on slowly pull away. It was headed for D.C., the last flight that could have gotten him to Arlington in time for the memorial. 9 minutes earlier, the gate agent had turned him away with a smirk and a cold line. "Sorry, sir. Uniforms don't guarantee you first class." Now the airport was locked down. Flights were frozen. His phone was buzzing with missed calls from the Department of Defense. Inside the busy terminal, passengers rushed to make connections, but Jack Reed stood still, calm but heavy. His crisp dress uniform caught glances from strangers, but most eyes were fixed on their screens, unaware of the tension unraveling around them. At 53, Jack carried the quiet weight of nearly 3 decades in service. He wasn't flashy, but the blue ribbon around his neck, bearing the Medal of Valor, drew attention whether he wanted it or not. His mission today wasn't tactical. It was personal. He was heading east for the funeral of Master Sergeant Anthony Tony Delgado, the man who saved his life during a firefight in Mosul nearly 20 years ago. Tony had held off enemy fire while Jack pulled injured troops to safety. Tony took the bullets meant for him, survived, but never truly came home. Jack had paid full fare for his first-class seat. No discount, no favors, just a soldier needing a few hours of quiet before he stood in front of Tony's family. But now that seat was gone. Agent Kendra Bloom, a by-the-book gate clerk for Republic Air, had brushed him off like another passenger with an attitude. At 28, with 3 years of airline experience, Kendra was a stickler for procedure. When Jack calmly presented his boarding pass and ID, she barely glanced before repeating company policy. "You need to cover the difference, sir, or move to economy." He explained again. Paid full fare. No military discount. No upgrade request. Just facts. Her response was practiced. Rules are rules. The plane rolled back from the gate with his name still on the manifest, but his seat empty. Jack didn't lose his cool. Years of combat had taught him to deal with situations far worse than this. But as he watched the aircraft fade from view, that all-too-familiar tightness crept into his chest. He thought of Tony's flag-draped coffin, waiting for brothers in arms to arrive. And here he was, stranded because someone behind a counter couldn't see past a name and a uniform. He stepped aside, pulled out his laptop, and quietly opened the email confirmation showing the full first-class fare. No military discount, no error. He showed it to Kendra. She glanced for less than 5 seconds and dismissed it. "You'll have to take it up with billing," she said flatly. Jack knew what that meant. Long hold times, disconnected lines, dead ends. This wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about comfort. It was about what that trip meant. Missing Tony's funeral was unacceptable. So, Jack opened his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in years. General Mira Caldwell, current head of the Joint Forces Command. She had served with both him and Tony in Iraq. "Mira, I need help. They won't let me on the plane. I'm going to miss Tony's funeral." There was a pause. "You're kidding," she said. "No, ma'am." She hung up with one word. "Handled." Within minutes, movement stopped across the terminal. Every monitor flickered. A system-wide halt of all outbound flights had been ordered. Gate agents everywhere looked around in confusion, but Kendra's face went pale as her screen lit up with a red level alert. Federal agents entered through a side door near gate C-12, flashing credentials and speaking quietly into radios. Passengers nearby started whispering. Some pulled out phones. Others stepped away, sensing the air had shifted. Agent Raul Mendoza from Homeland Security stepped forward. "Ms. Bloom, we need to speak about your interaction with Colonel Reed." Kendra's attempt to explain dissolved the moment Mendoza pulled up Jack's original reservation. Full payment. No discount. No error. Just prejudice wrapped in policy. Within half an hour, Republic Air's regional director arrived in person with a pre-printed apology letter and a new boarding pass. "Colonel Reed, on behalf of our airline, I sincerely apologize. We're reinstating your seat and providing complimentary priority service for life." Jack didn't smile. "I don't want free flights," he said evenly. "I want to make sure no one in uniform is ever disrespected like this again, especially not while trying to say goodbye to one of our own." The director nodded. Trying to keep up. Understood, sir. We're implementing changes effective immediately. As Kendra was escorted away, terminated on the spot, her face showed a mix of confusion and disbelief. She just learned that some mistakes don't get second chances. Later that evening, Flight 923 was brought back to the gate under federal escort. Jack boarded quietly. Some passengers clapped. Others nodded. He gave a polite nod in return and settled into the first-class seat that never should have been taken from him. The next morning, he stood at Arlington under overcast skies. The flag from Tony's casket was folded and handed to Tony's wife and kids. After the service, she approached Jack with tired eyes and a brave smile. Tony always said you'd go through hell to be here if you had to. Jack handed her the folded flag. I just did. What happened at that gate wasn't about a seat. It was about recognition, about respect, about the quiet obligation carried by those who've worn the uniform. It was a reminder that the fight for dignity doesn't stop at the battlefield, and that sometimes the most important battles happen in places no one expects. As the sun rose over Arlington and the last notes of taps echoed across the quiet grounds, Jack Reed stood motionless. The chill in the morning air didn't bother him. Not today. Today was about honoring a man who had once thrown himself into gunfire so others could live. Tony Delgado wasn't just a soldier. He was the kind of friend who carried burdens without asking, who didn't flinch when everything around him was falling apart. Jack owed him more than words could repay. And yet, just hours earlier, it had almost gone another way. It wasn't enemy fire that nearly kept him from this farewell. It was bureaucracy. Cold, indifferent policy wielded by someone who saw a uniform, not a person. A gate agent who couldn't, or wouldn't, see beyond her checklist. That's what stung the most. Not the denied seat or the missed flight. It was the moment Jack realized that even now, after all these years, there are still places where honor means nothing unless someone forces it to matter. But he didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw his weight around. Instead, he did what every leader learns to do: solve the problem without causing collateral damage. He made one call, used one favor, and set in motion a chain of accountability that held someone responsible. Not for revenge, not for spectacle, but because the line between respect and disrespect is thinner than most people realize, and it matters who draws it. What happened at Gate C-12 will fade from headlines in time. The agent will move on. The airline will roll out new training. But for every veteran who stood in line wearing the weight of their service only to be overlooked or dismissed, this was more than just one incident. It was proof that silence isn't the only way to respond. That dignity doesn't have to be loud, but does have to be defended. Jack didn't ask for applause. He never wanted compensation. He wanted to stand here, on this morning, and hand Tony's kids their father's folded flag without carrying the shame of having let them down. Because for men like Jack Reed and Tony Delgado, service doesn't end with retirement. It continues in every moment when values are tested, and someone has to step up. Whether it's a battlefield in Iraq or a boarding gate in Phoenix, leadership still matters. So does courage. So does showing up, even when the world makes it harder than it should be. As Jack left the cemetery, he didn't look back. He'd said what needed to be said. He'd kept his promise. And in the quiet space between the salute and the silence, he understood something simple. Sometimes moving heaven and earth isn't about power. It's about persistence. It's about principle. And it's about never letting anyone forget what true service really looks like.